In the entire Western Turkic Khaganate, the only person that one needed to be concerned about was Ishbara Khagan. Now that Wang Chong had appeared, Urbis Shiryun and Wunu Shibi weren't worth worrying about. As for the rest, without a leader, they couldn't form a substantial threat. Right, Your Highness. At this moment, Duwu Sili, who had been standing nearby, suddenly rushed forward to stand in front of Wang Chong. In front of the domineering Wang Chong, Duwu Sili appeared hesitant, both afraid and eager. Your Highness, what you promised me. Duwu Sili couldn't help but say. So that's what this is about. Wang Chong grinned. This king already agreed to treat your cultivation defect, so I naturally will, but now is not the time. Understood. Understood. Duwu Sili let out a sigh of relief, his entire body relaxing. In the Battle of Talas, because he had cultivated formation phenomena, he suffered from a cultivation defect that caused his strength to plunge to less than half of what it was at his peak. Recently, Wang Chong had emerged and used the Origin Immortal Art to heal his injuries, additionally increasing his cultivation. It was this major boost in strength that allowed him to manifest the celestial wolf of desolation that had defeated Wunu Shibi. But Wang Chong had told him before this that this boost would be temporary, that he would need to treat him again to totally remove the injuries. Swoosh! Wang Chong left Wunu Shibi and Ishbara Khagan to Duwu Sili and then headed for the summit. Now that Ishbara Khagan was taken care of, all that was left were Supreme Divine and Meteor Divine. Once those two were taken care of, the discord in the Western Turkic Khaganate would be totally pacified. Attend me. Pass on my order. The Khagan has decreed that we are siding with the Great Tang. As Wang Chong departed, Bars had swiftly issued several orders. Mamur, Bududi. Take the tokens of Imperial Father and Great General Wunu Shibi, and end the battle down below. Imperial Father, Great General, I have wronged you. Duwu Sili. Take care of the emissaries from Yusang and Yuzhou. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with satisfaction upon hearing that composed voice. He had chosen fourth Prince Bars had for good reason. Compared to how he had been at their first meeting more than 1 year ago, Barshad was now both courageous and wise, calm and strategic. He had experienced an evolution. He had the bearing of a sovereign, and with his abilities and Duwu Sili's support, he was more than capable of controlling the Western Turkic Khaganate. Of course, Wang Chong was also not afraid that Bars had might be planning some sort of scheme. That would simply be suicidal. Whoosh! With these thoughts in mind, Wang Chong hastened his pace, rising into the sky. Wang Chong had been here for some time now, and for some reason, these two newly appeared experts of the Celestial God Organization felt very strange to him. Their power was extremely special. Damn it! In the air, Supreme Divine and Meteor Divine were battling fiercely with the demonic Emperor Old Man and Wushang Village Chief. The two of them had long ago noticed the battle on the ground, and they had also noticed Wang Chong's sudden appearance. The two of them had tried multiple times to kill the demonic Emperor Old Man and Wushang Village Chief so they could join the battle below, but they had failed. These two human elders were much more difficult to deal with than they had imagined. Even worse was that the human youth who had appeared last was extremely frightening. The two of them were strong enough to deal with the Wushang Village Chief and demonic Emperor Old Man, but a third expert of this caliber was their breaking point. The battle had quickly turned against them. Chong-er, let's work together to kill them, the demonic Emperor Old Man called out in his deep voice, also noticing Wang Chong coming over. Their stellar energies are infused with ancient, natural divine power. Use your great Yin-Yang heaven creation art to absorb it, and it will definitely be of great assistance to you. Natural divine power? Wang Chong was flabbergasted. He had never heard of energy of this sort before. Bastard! This god doesn't believe he can't kill you. Supreme Divine was infuriated by the demonic Emperor Old Man's words. Bang! Stellar energy erupted from his body, and the terrifying abyss behind him surged with power. Dark clouds formed in the air and swept toward the demonic Emperor Old Man. Myriad energies become one. The demonic Emperor Old Man's robes rustled around him as he brought the index and middle fingers of his right hand together. With a great rumble, He manifested tens of thousands of giant swords that shot forward and slammed into Supreme Divine's attack. In the hands of the current demonic Emperor Old Man, the myriad spirit sea art was now tinged with the power of spacetime, and his dark golden sword chi seemed unstoppable. Boom boom boom. Energies clashed, and in the end, no matter how much Supreme Divine raged, he failed to break through the demonic Emperor Old Man's attack. Let's go! Seeing that he had failed to defeat the demonic Emperor Old Man multiple times, Supreme Divine began to consider retreat. If he survived, he would still have a chance. Now that the enemy had more peak experts than his side, and seeing that Ishbarakagan was crippled and the Western Turks now bound to join the Great Tang, his first priority was now to retreat and preserve his strength. They could think of some way to recruit the Western Turkic Khaganate in the future. It's too late to think about leaving. With a cold and emotionless voice, Wang Chong attacked. Great destruction art. The earth for several dozen li around trembled, all of Mount Sami shuddering as the vast energy of the earth was pulled into Wang Chong's body, in the end transforming into an attack of immense destructive power. Crack! The fabric of space tore apart as a wave of green-black energy swept toward Supreme Divine. At this moment, the entire world seemed to pale. Not good. Supreme Divine instantly felt an intense danger. If he had been facing one person, whether it was the demonic Emperor Old Man or Wang Chong, he would have felt no fear, but the two of them working together was something else entirely. Ancient Thunder Deity. Supreme Divine's body exploded with lightning, and a dark energy that was infused with the power of nature, that was even more domineering than the energy of the subtle realm, burst out of his body. And when Supreme Divine used this move, thunder rumbled in the clouds overhead, and silver snakes streaked through the snowstorm to appear behind Supreme Divine. With the assistance of this primal energy, Supreme Divine grew stronger and stronger, and a mysterious golden symbol appeared on the center of his forehead. The golden symbol was somewhat blurred and indistinct, as if it was still incomplete. Bang! In a flash, the dark lightning Supreme Divine had summoned collided with the attacks from Wang Chong and the demonic Emperor Old Man. Crack! The heavens darkened as they were torn open, the region around the trio ravaged by chaotic and violent streams of energy. Even the snow falling from the sky seemed frozen in time. But a moment later, squelch! A sharp blade cut through flesh. Supreme Divine shivered as his eyes flew open and he slowly looked down. There, an extremely sharp, golden short halberd had pierced through his back and come out his front, dripping blood from its tip. As this halberd pierced through him, Supreme Divine felt all the energy draining out of him like air from a punctured balloon. This is Firmament Supreme's weapon. Supreme Divine's face went pale in disbelief as he stared. In the Celestial God organization, all of the Supremes were mighty individuals. Firmament Supreme's golden short halberd was known for carrying a powerful stellar-piercing attribute. Not even the three divines of the heavenly mandate could stop it. He had never imagined that Firmament Supreme's divine weapon would fall into Wang Chong's hands, and that Wang Chong could even activate its special attributes. New! A scream came from nearby. Meteor Divine had seen this scene transpire with widened eyes, his breath almost stopping. Supreme Divine was not dead, but he was a step away. Meteor Divine could have never imagined that someone of Supreme Divine strength couldn't withstand even one move from Wang Chong. Everything had happened too quickly. He hadn't even had a chance to stop him. Whoosh! A moment later, Meteor Divine gave up on the Wuxiang village chief and immediately began to flee. But though Meteor Divine had reacted quickly, the Wuxiang village chief was even faster. Bang! The Wuxiang village chief threw out his white cane. Rah! With a roar, the cane transformed into a white dragon that pursued Meteor Divine. Ah! Sensing the danger approaching, Meteor Divine was forced to turn his head and fire off an attack to block the Wuxiang village chief's assault. But this slight delay decided Meteor Divine's fate. Kill! Wang Chong's eyes turned cold. Grabbing Supreme Divine with one hand, he shot after Meteor Divine, the demonic Emperor Old Man following close behind. Battles between experts were decided in seconds. Though Meteor Divine had only turned back for a moment, this was more than enough for his enemies. The trio of Wang Chong, the demonic emperor old man, and the Wuxiang village chief was essentially unstoppable unless a master of Genesis Supreme's level appeared. Aya! A few moments later, with a blood-chilling scream, the battle ended. Whoosh! After a long while, Wang Chong let out a long breath of air, his body cracking and groaning. As Meteor Divine's power entered his body, Wang Chong swelled in strength. Moreover, with a thought from him, Wang Chong distorted the space around him, and meteors created from stellar energy manifested around him. Dark heavens. After absorbing Meteor Divine's energy, Wang Chong had also obtained this dark heavens ability from him. A mighty divine power that was completely different from subtle realm energy was now flowing through his body. Though the skies were covered in dark clouds and falling snow, Wang Chong could sense meteoroids high up in space. He seemed to have some sort of mysterious connection with them. He even felt like he could absorb energy from them to strengthen himself. This was another form of universal energy. This journey to the Western Turks was truly worth it, Wang Chong said to himself. Crack! He twisted his hand, snapping Meteor Divine's neck. The body dropped from the skies and crashed into the snow. Wang Chong turned his gaze to Supreme Divine, who was being held by his master. Supreme Divine venomously glared at Wang Chong and hatefully said, Wang Chong, you won't die a good death. Mortals who oppose gods have never met a good end. Venerable Genesis Supreme won't let you go. What? He's still not dead. Wang Chong smiled at these words. It seems I wasn't vicious enough last time and let him escape. But next time, he won't get so lucky. Supreme Divine stretched out his neck and viciously said, Don't get too cocky. Venerable Genesis Supreme has already repaired his body, and heaven has granted him a treasure. He will only be stronger than before. But you won't have the miniature 9 provinces domain to protect you anymore. If looks could kill, Wang Chong would have died countless times by now. Oh! Wang Chong raised an eyebrow. This was undoubtedly an unexpected harvest. He clearly recalled Genesis Supreme shattering from his attack, leaving only a soul that fled in panic. But Supreme Divine had revealed that not only had he recovered, he had obtained a new body. The men in black really did have the ability to recreate a body. This was a truly shocking ability. Wang Chong's heart couldn't help but tremble in apprehension. But he quickly calmed himself down. Relax. I won't give him another chance. Genesis Supreme will be utterly slain next time. Wang Chong coldly chuckled and then grabbed Supreme Divine's head. Boom! The great yin-yang heaven creation art activated, and the natural divine power in Supreme Divine's body surged out of him and into Wang Chong, strengthening him. At the same time, Wang Chong sent a stream of psychic energy into Supreme Divine's mind. No matter how much Supreme Divine said, it wouldn't compare to using mental techniques to personally search him for information on the Celestial God Organization. Someone at Supreme Divine's level of strength was probably privy to a great deal of information, but Wang Chong wanted to know only one thing: where the base of the Celestial God Organization was. Wang Chong's psychic energy flowed into Supreme Divine's mind, and at the center, he once more saw that gleaming golden seal. Just like all the other men in black, Supreme Divine had a psychic seal in the center of his mind, but unlike ordinary men in black, the psychic seal in the minds of the 3 divines of the heavenly mandate was purely meant to defend against outsiders. It did not prevent them from entering and leaving their primary base. Heh! Stop dreaming. You will not be able to learn the secret location of our main base. Every time someone leaves the main base, their minds will automatically produce a seal designed by heaven. No one can break it, and no matter how strong you are still an ant-like mortal. Mortals can never oppose true gods. Supreme Divine brazenly laughed, blood flowing out of his orifices as the energy drained out of his body. He grew weaker and weaker, and he would soon meet the same fate as Meteor Divine. But Supreme Divine didn't seem to care. He seemed to have gone insane, mockingly staring at Wang Chong as if he was looking at a dead man. Foolish mortal. He had already seen from how Meteor Divine had been dealt with that Wang Chong sought the highest secrets of the Celestial God Organization. But this was wishful thinking. An organization that had existed for tens of thousands of years, countless epochs, would not leave any sort of weakness. No matter how strong humans were, they were far too insignificant. Is that so? Wang Chong coldly laughed, not angered at all. Nightmare beast, it's up to you. Master village chief, lend me a hand. As Wang Chong spoke, a psychic energy much stronger than Wang Chong's shot out from his bosom. At the same time, the Wuxiang village chief and demonic emperor old man placed their hands on Wang Chong's body. Boom! A moment later, the combined powers of 3 humans and 1 beast blasted into Supreme Divine's mind. Just as expected, with an earthquaking shatter, the golden seal in Supreme Divine's mind exploded. When infiltration of an outside force reached a certain limit within the seal, it would explode. But this time, as the seal exploded, Wang Chong could see golden shards that he had not seen with Meteor Divine. These were the core memories that Supreme Divine had sealed. If the Western Turks resist, kill Ishbara. The purification plan needs to move faster. As for Arabia, the Fulin people will hold them down. In at most 10 days, the plan to exterminate the Great Tang can begin. With 30,000 Yeluo assisting, and Yaluoshan should be able to succeed. Everything must be obliterated. If it does not succeed, the Celestial Army will be mobilized. A figure stood tall in a massive, dark blue space, his body exuding a storm of energy. Wang Chong had never seen this man before, but he instantly recognized the voice. Genesis Supreme. He really wasn't dead, and he really had gotten a new body, one that seemed even stronger. Buzz! The golden shard quickly disappeared, and Wang Chong soon gathered more bits and pieces of information appearing in his mind. Wang Chong saw a massive mountain floating in the void, with massive snow-white beasts flying around it, raising their necks and howling to the skies. Everything vanished as quickly as it had come. After a long while, Wang Chong finally opened his eyes. How was it? The demonic emperor old man asked. Still haven't found it, but I found some clues. As Wang Chong spoke, he snapped Supreme Divine's neck and threw his corpse down. Rumble. Wang Chong circulated the energy through his dantian, and his body immediately began to seethe with frenzied power. Around him, space distorted as a black abyss appeared. Wang Chong now possessed all of Supreme Divine's power. But completely digesting the natural divine power would still take some time. Let's proceed to the next stage of the plan, Wang Chong coldly said as he raised his head, a frightening glint in his eyes. Whoosh! On the northern end of the Tibetan plateau, closest to the borders of the Western Turkic Khaganate, a group of warhorses peered toward the north. At the lead of these horsemen was a muscular general, his body blazing with energy. In Yusang, there was only one man with such vast and blazing energy. Namri Songtian. Is there still no news? Namri Songtian suddenly asked. Behind him was an army of more than 30,000 Tibetan elites. Each one had immense energy that made the effects of cold weather almost negligible. These Tibetan cavalry had been selected by Namri Songtian from all across Yusang. According to his original plan, the moment their emissaries sent the signal, he would ride out with his 30,000 men and assist Western Turkic First Prince Urbis Shiryun in suppressing the rebellion, thus ensuring that the Western Turks would join the alliance. Until then, 30,000 Tibetan cavalry was far too large of a force, and entering the Turkic steppe too early would cause many problems. Ishbara Khagan was not a man to be lightly provoked. "Milord, we have not received any word from the north," a messenger replied. "How long has it been since the emissaries sent word?" Namri Songtian frowned. Whether they succeeded or failed, the news should arrive within 2 hours, the messenger respectfully replied. Namri Songtian said nothing, his brows creasing even more. For some reason, he had an extremely bad feeling. Whoosh! At this moment, the flapping of wings broke Namri Songtian out of his stupor, and he looked up to see a hunting falcon flying through the snowstorm toward him. Namri Songtian received the hunting falcon, opened the letter it carried, and instantly paled. How could this be? How did he appear there? Namri Songtian felt like he had been struck by a lightning bolt, his hands shaking. That man's movements were far too sudden and shocking. Go! 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 Everyone, leave at once. No stopping. Namri Songtian pulled on the reins of his horse and immediately began to ride back into the Tibetan plateau. "Milord! General!" The orderly ranks of cavalry instantly fell into disarray. None of them knew what was happening. Everyone in Yusang knew that great General Namri Songtian was a composed and steady character. None of them had imagined that a mere letter could frighten him so badly. "Run!" But in response to their shock was Namri Songtian's furious roar from the distance. Namri Songtian had never imagined that Wang Chong would suddenly appear amongst the Western Turks and pacify all parties. Even worse was that if Wang Chong had appeared there, it meant that he wasn't far from Yusang. No one in Yusang understood Wang Chong's style more than Namri Songtian. This man was already the evil god of the world. It was hard to say if he wouldn't strike against Yusang. Even though he had tens of thousands of Tibetan cavalry backing him, Namri Songtian had no confidence in his ability to escape from the war saint alive. Rumble. Under Namri Songtian's guidance, the Tibetan cavalry fell back like a routed army. This was truly a defeat before a battle had even begun. But not long after Namri Songtian had disappeared, several figures on horseback appeared where Namri Songtian had been standing. What a quick reaction! Sun Jiming dismounted, looked around, and broke out in laughter. Judging by the freshness of the hoofprints, they probably just withdrew, and it seems that they were in great disarray. This Namri Songtian had a rather fast reaction. Who in this continent is not afraid of our liege? For Namri Songtian to immediately retreat without hesitation is an indication that he is a proper general. Softly chuckling, Chun Burang dismounted as well. After inspecting the situation at a crouch, he quickly straightened up. In the past, it would have been inconceivable for a minor general to joke about a renowned great general, but that was then and this was now. After all, they served the mighty war saint. But it's thanks to his swift reaction that there are not tens of thousands more corpses on the Tibetan plateau today, Chen Burang coldly said. In times of trouble, harsh laws were needed. He and Sun Jiming had just come to scout the situation. If Namri Songtian had not withdrawn, then a great battle would have ensued. The Great Tang's war with Yuzhou was imminent, and Yusang was harboring ill intentions. At this time, their liege was no longer too concerned about appearances. "Let's go!" Chun Burang mounted his horse, and together with Sun Jiming, left the Tibetan plateau. At the same time, far to the northeast in Yuzhou, from the sky, one could see that the vast and grandiose Anong Protectorate headquarters, lurking like a crouching behemoth, had a new wall circling it. It was evident that this wall was newly built. In Zhang Shogui's era, the Anong Protectorate headquarters had never had a defensive wall around it. The Yuzhou army had maintained an extremely aggressive strategy. But Yaluoshan was different. That steel fortress to the south exerted an immense pressure on him. "Wang Chong, you won't be able to stay cocky for too long. Once I settle things with the Western Turks, we'll have our battle to the death." And Yaluoshan looked southward, and as he thought about what was happening in the Western Turkic Khaganate at this very moment, immense ambition swelled in his heart. Everything else was ready. All he lacked was the east wind. From the intelligence he had already gathered, it appeared that while Ishbara Khagan was reluctant to make a decision, in some cases not making a decision was a decision in itself. All of the world knew about Wang Chong's famous letter about hunting on Mount Sanmi. How could someone as proud as Ishbara Khagan swallow his anger? All Yaluoshan had needed to do was add some fuel to the fire and assist Ishbara Khagan in realizing the decision that he had already made. "Urbis Shiryun, I've done all I can to assist you. The rest will depend on your plan." And Yaluoshan internally remarked, narrowing his eyes. Probably not even Ishbara Khagan knew that he had been privately working with Urbis Shiryun for some time. Looking back on it, the two of them had been working together since the Feast of All Countries. Once they both returned to their homes from the capital, they had secretly signed a treaty of alliance. Not long ago, Urbis Shiryun had revealed all his plans. If all went as expected, Shamal should have attempted to assassinate Ishbara Khagan, forcing the Khagan to execute Bar's head. Gao Shang, "Have you not found anything yet?" asked Inauthentic as he stared into the snowstorm. The distance between the Western Turkic Khaganate and Yuzhou was vast. Even the fastest bird would take several days. But divination did not have this sort of restriction. A powerful strategist and astrologer like Gao Shang would be able to notice any shift amongst the Western Turks. In truth, ever since Supreme Divine and Meteor Divine had left, Gao Shang had been observing the heavenly phenomena of the Western Turks. The countries around the Great Tang had weaker kingly energies, but the heavens encompassed all things, including the Western Turkic Khaganate. Though it took a little effort, he could still observe the heavenly phenomena of the Western Turks. After a brief silence, Gao Shang said, "The heavens are ambiguous, appearing to be suffering from some heavy disruption. I can't tell what's going on yet." He was wearing his scholarly robes and a thick robe of fox fur. Seated cross-legged on the wall, he was constantly making motions with his fingers. He had spent the last hour constantly calculating. Is the Great Tang's divination group that powerful? And Yaluishan's heart sank, his brow slightly creasing. Though Li Heng was young, he was extremely difficult to deal with. After learning of how Dragon Qi had been stolen during the Feast of All Countries, Li Heng had immediately summoned the world's best sorcerers and formed them into a divination team who disrupted the heavenly phenomena and prevented Yuzhou from learning of their actions. Ever since then, Yaluishan had been forced to change his opinion of the new emperor. After all, the Central Plains is currently the reigning sovereign, possessing the power of the world, so the astrologers there will be more efficient. However, the power of humans is nothing compared to the heavens. While they might be able to conceal or disturb minor movements in the heavens, larger movements are like an avalanche. No one can conceal them or stop them, Gao Shang confidently declared. In the end, the Central Plains was home to the reigning power, and considering Wang Chong's existence, it would be far stranger if it only sat around and did nothing. In addition, Your Excellency should rest easy. Earlier, I saw that the kingly energy of the Western Turks was beginning to fuse with the energy of the other countries. This shows that Ishbara Khagan has already made his decision. All we are doing is pushing the boat along the current. With the assistance from Supreme Divine and Meteor Divine, the Western Turkic Khaganate should eventually join our alliance. There shouldn't be any surprises that are too big, Gao Shang said. And Yaluishan nodded, his eyes brightening. Gao Shang was a superb diviner, and if he said that there wouldn't be any major problems, then it had to be the case. Cui Qianyu, Tian Qianjin, how are your preparations going? And Yaluishan suddenly said. Cui Qianyu and Tian Qianjin bowed and reported, Your Excellency, all the recruits have finished training and the armories are complete. We can go into battle at any time. The discussions with the other countries are all done, and all the countries have agreed to the terms of the alliance. Once we begin the war against the Great Tang, Your Excellency will take the lead. Everyone will follow your orders. In addition, we have already finished planning out all the battle routes. Good. And Yaluishan couldn't help but feel a little pride. All we need is the news from the Western Turks. Then, the army can set out and crush the Great Tang. And Yaluishan looked toward the south as he spoke, but he kept one last comment to himself. And we can tear that brat to pieces. Reporting. Just then, a horseman galloped in from the western side of the Anong Protectorate headquarters. The rider had a panicked expression as he held a letter and rode frantically through the snowstorm. This sudden movement drew the attention of the group gathered on the wall tower. And Yaluishan, Cui Qianyu, Tian Qianjin, they all turned to the rider. Cui Qianyu, go and see what's going on. Such a frantic appearance is no good for morale. And Yaluishan coldly barked. And Yaluishan was growing stricter and stricter on his army. Yuzhou now had an army of 600,000 soldiers, and when joined with the armies of the other countries, it was an army of millions. Nothing could get done without law and order, and if they ran around in this sort of panic with everything they did, the army would fall apart. Not good. Suddenly, Gao Shang cried out, his body trembling as if he had been struck by lightning, and his face went ghastly pale. A shift in the Western Turks. The Khagan has changed. It is not Urbis Shiryun, but Barzhad. The Western Turks have gone over to the Great Tang. What? Gao Shang's words exploded like a thunderclap in everyone's ears. All of the Yuzhou generals were left dumbfounded. Bars had was enthroned? The Western Turks joined the Great Tang? How could this be? Two peerless experts in Supreme Divine and Meteor Divine had gone to assist. Urbis Shiryun was acting as their insider, and even Ishbara Kagan had favored the alliance. Was all this still not enough to get the Western Turkic Khaganate on their side? How? Gao Shang had no time for their reactions, for his mind was reeling, and Yaluishan and his generals did not understand divination, so they couldn't see, but in Gao Shang's eyes, the heavens were in complete turmoil, the world tossing and turning as if swept up in a storm. Far in the west, in the direction that represented the Western Turkic Khaganate, Ishbara Kagan's star dimmed, and at the same time another star brightened. This was not Urbis Shiryun's star, but Barshid's. Not only that, the moment Barshad was enthroned, the earthly energies and the dragon chi of the world changed. The kingly energies of the other countries also shifted. The dragon chi of the Great Tang to the south brightened while the Eastern Turks' dragon chi fell into turmoil. Even the clear heavens above Yuzhou showed signs of disturbance. The heavens had changed far too much, far too quickly, transforming into a stormy sea. Even an experienced strategist like Gao Shang felt an indescribable shock at this development. Moments after Gao Shang had finished speaking, the messenger called out, "Your Excellency! Bad news! The Western Turks have sent a message. Fourth Prince Barshad has ascended to the throne and allied with the Great Tang against the Goguryeo Empire. In addition, the Western Turkic Khaganate has declared war against the Eastern Turkic Khaganate and has already begun to battle it." Shock. Incredible shock. The master and his subordinates stood atop the tower, their minds blank. Too many things had happened this day. It was one thing for the Western Turkic Khaganate to side with the Great Tang, but why had it also declared war on the Eastern Turkic Khaganate? Most importantly, how, despite their overwhelming advantage with Supreme Divine, Meteor Divine, Urbis Shiryun, and Ishbara Kagan all in favor, had the Western Turks ultimately decided to side with the Great Tang? There were still many unclear details. Whoosh! As Yaluishan and his men reeled in shock from the news, a few seconds later, they heard the flapping of wings. Looking up, they saw a golden falcon with the emblem of the Eastern Turkic Khaganate descend toward the tower. Cui Qianyu personally received this bird, his hand exerting a pull that drew the falcon into his grip. As he opened the letter, his tough face paled. "Your Excellency, Osmish Kagan has sent word that the army of the Western Turkic Khaganate just mobilized and assaulted the Khaganate. The two sides are engaged in a fierce battle at the border. The Eastern Turkic Khaganate was caught off guard and has suffered heavy losses. They're requesting reinforcements." The wall tower fell silent. Even the hardiest of the generals was somewhat at a loss, somewhat panicked. As for Yaluishan, his face had twisted into a nasty scowl. "Bastard!" And Yaluishan clenched his fists in anger. The Western Turks shouldn't have joined the Great Tang so easily. What in the world happened? And Yaluishan stood atop the tower, coldly staring at the messenger below. Even though the weather was cold, the prostrate Yuzhou messenger had broken out in a cold sweat. It was a sudden development, so we don't know the details, but there are rumors that the Great Tang's king of foreign lands appeared in the Western Turkic Khaganate. What? Everyone on the tower grimaced. Wang Chong. Wasn't he at the steel fortress in the Tsang province? How could he have crossed that vast distance and arrived in the land of the Western Turks? How? "I heard that, in the battle at the capital, for people attacked Genesis Supreme," Tian Shenzhen suddenly said. Besides Wang Chong, there were 3 people who looked exactly like him. It now appears that this rumor was true. It seems that man in the capital has cultivated some sort of cloning ability. He had a force under his command specifically meant for gathering intelligence, and he had read this in one of the reports. A clone. This was an almost mythical ability that surpassed the bounds of martial arts. Thus, none of them had believed this news when they first read about it. As for Genesis Supreme, he had remained aloof, disdaining to speak with mortals, so they had never gotten the full story on what had happened in the capital. But it now seemed that they had to believe that rumor. "Your Excellency, what do we do now?" A voice broke the oppressive stillness. The Western Turkic Khaganate had been an extremely important part of their plan. Once they recruited the Western Turkic Khaganate, the countries of the alliance would be like a steel monolith, and their combined powers would be enough to crush the Great Tang. But now, the Western Turks had joined the Great Tang, completely upsetting their plans. Even worse was that not only had the alliance essentially had an arm hacked off, the powerful Yusang Empire was now isolated from the rest of the alliance. For the alliance, this was the worst news possible. It had essentially lost an extremely formidable strategist in Dalen Trinling. Dalen Trinling would not forsake the Yusang army and run off to Yuzhou alone. The air grew more stifling, and Yaluoshan's heart cold. Everyone knew what he was thinking, but they also knew that deploying their men to assist the Eastern Turkic Khaganate in pushing back the Western Turks would do little to salvage this terrible situation. The mood was heavy, and Yaluoshan slowly closed his eyes. After a long period of helpless silence, a voice finally spoke. "Your Excellency, what's done is done. The Western Turks are attacking the Eastern Turkic Khaganate to show their loyalty to the Great Tang. Thus, it will be impossible for the Western Turkic Khaganate to join the alliance." Gao Shang had gotten to his feet now. His expression was grave, but there was still some energy in his voice. "There is only one final chance to break out of this situation." "What?" Gao Shang's words took everyone by surprise, and like a drowning man clutching onto a piece of rope, they all turned to Gao Shang. Gao Shang was a scholar through and through, but everyone had to confess that he played an increasingly important role in Yozhou's operations, surpassing the likes of Cui Qianyu and Tian Qianjin. "What's the way?" And Yaluoshan quickly said, "The shifting of the heavens and changing of dynasties are all decided by destiny. Fate has ordained that the Central Plains will face a calamity. No one can change this, and Your Excellency is the man who will deal with this calamity. I have gathered several sorcerers from the surrounding countries and the Central Plains, including several priests, and we have determined that it won't be long before the world falls into chaos. The dragon Qi of the Central Plains will experience great turmoil, and Your Excellency is the Black Dragon, the future true dragon, son of heaven, and Yuzhou is Your Excellency's dragon den. When the great shift occurs, we will follow the will of the heavens and guide the Qi of the Black Dragon to fuse with Your Excellency. At that moment, Your Excellency and the commanders of the other countries will be bolstered by the fortune of the world, your soldiers endowed with divine might. As for the Great Tang, it will encounter numerous obstacles and hindrances. This will be Your Excellency's best chance. This is what it means to comply with the mandate of heaven. If we do this, Your Excellency will be able to lead the other countries in defeating the Great Tang." Gao Shang sternly said. Complying with the mandate of heaven was not an empty phrase. Whenever dynasties changed, the master diviners always had their ways of assisting the hidden dragons that were fated to deal with calamities grow stronger and defeat their rivals. Gao Shang had discovered this method from an ancient text that he had paid an enormous price to obtain. "I leave this matter to you," and Yaluoshan finally said after a few moments of silence. And Yaluoshan had no idea what method Gao Shang spoke of, but after stealing some of the sage emperor's dragon Qi in the Feast of All Countries, and Yaluoshan knew that many mysterious and enigmatic things that he had never believed in really did exist, and they possessed far more power than a human could imagine. In his current situation, he had no choice except to trust Gao Shang. Gao Shang nodded and said no more. Some things would only be understood when the time was right. And Yaluoshan quickly turned to his generals. "Cui Qianyu, Tian Qianjin, immediately deploy your men to assist the Eastern Turkic Khaganate against the Western Turks." "Yes." Cui Qianyu and Tian Qianjin bowed. Rumble. Just when they were about to leave, a great rumbling came from the northeast. A boundless energy erupted out of the snowstorm and began to approach Yuzhou. Everyone immediately turned to see what this was. At first glance, they couldn't see anything, but a moment later, nay, a horse that seemed to be halfway through the decay process, its body covered in rusted armor, emerged out of the snow. Atop this horse was a muscular warrior. At this moment, All of them could see the crimson eyes of that rider that were like burning flames, brimming with madness, brutality, callousness. All sorts of negative emotions were contained in those crimson eyes, and none of them could sense any life from that human-shaped rider. The Yelluo! It's the Yelluo! Someone nervously called out. It wasn't any of the generals on the wall, but a nearby soldier of the Anong Protectorate Army. The army around the Anong Protectorate headquarters had been quiet and orderly, but now it was like a herd of sheep beset by tigers, a scene of utter chaos. All the Yuzhou cavalry, including the drilling recruits, stopped whatever they were doing and hastily retreated as if they were running from the plague. The Yelluo, the third batch of 20,000 Yelluo, the one that Genesis Supreme had promised, had finally arrived. No one had expected such a pleasant surprise. Rumble. The earth swayed and shuddered as tens of thousands of cavalry appeared in a row, charging toward the Anong Protectorate headquarters like a tsunami. Their tens of thousands of cold, red eyes, devoid of any emotion, were like things out of one's deepest nightmares. So many Yelluo gathered together, their intimidating energy fused together, even managed to produce heavenly phenomena. Rumble. As these Yelluo approached the Anong Protectorate headquarters, black clouds gathered and followed the Yelluo in their advance. Powerful, cold, unstoppable. These were the feelings the Yelluo warriors gave to the Yuzhou generals. Moreover, it seemed that once there were enough Yelluo, they evolved to a new level of power. And not only that, Kree. In the very front, a powerful Yelluo that was more than 3 meters tall savagely howled and charged out of the snowstorm. Clang! The giant Yelluo raised up his spear, and as his war horse stepped forward, a silver halo flickering with white flames instantly erupted from its feet and spread to the entire army. White halos swiftly spread to all of the Yelluo, making them appear more frightening than even devils. Halo, the leader of the Yelluo? At this moment, let alone the ordinary Yuzhou cavalry, even in Yaluoshan and Gaoshang were dumbfounded. This last batch of Yelluo from Genesis Supreme was far too powerful. They had never known that these inhuman Yelluo could also have a leader. Boom! A few moments later, the 20,000 Yelluo cavalry stopped in unison around 10,000 feet away from the Anong Protectorate headquarters, all of their eyes slowly turning toward Yaluoshan. Silence. Absolute silence. At this moment, all time in the region of Yuzhou seemed to have stopped. Even the 600,000 Yuzhou soldiers had fallen silent. An energy that can swallow up the world and the ability to strictly follow orders. Incredible. Truly incredible. Xianxia looked down from the walls, his eyes wide open in disbelief. The 20,000 Yelluo were extremely powerful, and with the strict discipline they showed, let alone the Great Tang, they could conquer the world. Congratulations, Your Excellency. Congratulations. Xianxia immediately got down on his knees in front of Yaluoshan. Congratulations, Your Excellency. Congratulations. Cui Chenyu, Tianqingxi, and all the other Yuzhou generals kneeled as well. Even Gao Shang had prostrated. He had to admit that this batch of Yelluo was far more powerful than he had imagined. Congratulations, Your Excellency. Congratulations. Upon seeing what was going on, all the Yuzhou soldiers got on their knees, their voices resounding. Ha ha ha! Seeing this vast army, particularly the powerful Yelluo, and Yaluoshan felt pride swell up in his heart, along with boundless ambition, and his eyes exploded with light. Good! With these Yelluo, what can I not accomplish? All we need to wait for now is a shift in the heavens. Wang Chong, you won't be able to get cocky for too long. And Yaluoshan looked toward the south, his laugh resounding across the heavens. Several days went by, and putting aside Yuzhou, far away in the capital, at the King of Foreign Lands' residence, Your Highness, the Northwest is settled. The Western Turks fought a fierce battle with the Eastern Turks, and the Eastern Turks were caught totally unprepared and suffered heavy casualties. Osmish Kagan is enraged and has already begun to gather his army for a counterattack. Barshad was wounded, but his life is in no danger. At present, the Western Turks have engaged in a strategic retreat. Bars has sent a letter asking for what he should do next. Xianxia respectfully offered a letter. Xianxia felt sincere admiration for Wang Chong. With one trip to the north, he had completely overturned the Turkic steppe. After attacking the Eastern Turks, Bars had no path of retreat. This was his show of loyalty to the Great Tang. Have him retreat. Wang Chong lightly sipped on his cup of tea before casually saying, "As for the food promised, send it over." To combine kindness with might was the way to control one's subordinates. Although Wang Chong had ordered Bars had to attack the Eastern Turks to ensure that he could not back out, he had also promised him food to resolve the Western Turks' crisis. At this moment, Minister of War Zhangqiu Jianxiong spoke in his deep and steady voice, appearing somewhat worried. "Wang Chong, the Hu are not our people and have different cultures and customs. Can this Bars really be trusted? What if they betray us during a battle? The results would be unimaginable." It wasn't just Zhangqiu Jianxiong in the hall. King Song, Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, his big uncle Wang Zhen, Beacon General Jiang Yunrang, the Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Personnel, Inner Court Eunuch Director Li Jingzhong, almost all the factions of the imperial court had gathered here. Everyone turned to Wang Chong to see his response. Wang Chong sipped his tea and confidently said, "Relax. Nothing will happen. This war would decide the fate of the Central Plains and its millions of people. With so much on the line, he would never act on emotion and bet everything on Barshid's loyalty." Bars had already proposed moving all of the Western Turks' livestock and their old, young, women, and infirm into our interior, with only the warriors remaining in the north. In addition, the food we've given them is only enough to sustain them for the short term, Wang Chong indifferently said. Everyone in the hall was astonished by the news. Bars had proposed it on his own? This new Western Turkic Khagan was truly a wonderful person. With this, the Great Tang's troubles in the rear were completely resolved. Wang Chong took in their reactions and smiled. Bars truly was an interesting person. He had heard that Bars had read Righteous Individuals and Important Political Figures and had further studied the histories of the Central Plains, and if his proposals were anything to go by, he had not read those books in vain. Bars had trusted in Wang Chong and the Great Tang, and knew what the Great Tang was thinking. So he took the first steps to resolve the Great Tang's concerns about its rear. In this aspect, Bars truly was different from his father. He was sincere in siding with the Great Tang. Thus, Wang Chong did not mind trusting in Bars. "This is wonderful. This lowly one has never doubted your Highness's ability," Li Jingzhong suddenly said, glancing at the others. He had come representing Li Hong, and this statement was an acknowledgement of Wang Chong's abilities. "This lowly one and His Majesty are still concerned about Inauthentic in the northeast. Your Highness, what should be done?" Li Jingzhong said. "A report has come from Yuzhou saying that an additional 20,000 Yeluo have appeared in the Anong Protectorate headquarters. In addition, his army of 600,000 soldiers should be done training soon. In 10 some days, he should start sending out his soldiers." Wang Chong squinted as he lightly divulged a heaven-shaking piece of news. "This, Your Highness, 10 some days. So fast. Your Highness, are those Yeluo really so formidable?" a major official uneasily asked. "They truly are not something an ordinary person can contend with, but I have made plans. Gentlemen, please rest easy," Wang Chong calmly said. After pausing for a moment, he continued, "Su Kaoi, how is the training of the various armies going? Your Highness, the Mo Saber Unit, the Wuxian Cavalry, the Divine Martial Army, the Divine Prison Army, the Xuanwu Army. All of the elite armies will be done training in 10 some days. As for the ordinary soldiers, although they have been put through intense training, it was rather rushed, so it still might not be enough," admitted Su Kaoi, standing behind Wang Chong. Wang Chong turned pensive. With each passing day, Inauthentic grew stronger and stronger. The best solution was to attack before he was ready, but this was a war of grave importance. Inauthentic already had 30,000 powerful cavalry that could take mortal injuries without dying, whose strength was far above that of ordinary soldiers. Without the elite armies like the Mo Saber Unit or Wuxian Cavalry, the Great Tang would find it very hard to contend against Yuzhou and its allies. But Wang Chong and Inauthentic were racing against time. Wang Chong, regarding the two battlefields, have you already decided? Xianxia Jianxiong said. Wang Chong nodded and sternly said, The forward base in the northeast and Wuxiang in the northwest are the best two battlefields, and they are also the best two places to intercept them. Dalen Trinling is a poisonous snake, and the longer he lurks, the more dangerous he becomes. However, no matter how many modifications are made, one cannot change the route. Yu Sang's manpower remains his greatest weakness. No matter what, he cannot be allowed to join with the Alliance army in the northeast. The consequences would be unthinkable. They had already discussed the upcoming war multiple times, but in the end, they had followed Wang Chong's decision and chosen Wuxiang and the forward base. Dalen Trinling was too dangerous. No one understood this more than Wang Chong. Dalen Trinling was too dangerous. No one understood this more than Wang Chong. Dalen Trinling was a dragon trapped in a shallow pool. In this war, he needed to head to Yuzhou no matter what. Once he arrived, he would have a nigh limitless number of soldiers under his command. He would be a dragon swimming in the ocean, and the amount of damage he could do would be on a completely different level. Right now, Wang Chong was gambling that he would not abandon Yu Sang's cavalry and people and head alone to Yuzhou. If that was the case, then so long as Wang Chong kept an army garrisoned in Wuxiang's city of steel, together with the Western Turks, he could intercept Dalen Trinling and prevent him from safely reaching the east. Wuxiang as the second battlefield was intended to keep Dalen Trinling as an imprisoned beast, a necessity to ensure that this renowned strategist could not exhibit his full power. This was an extremely important part of Wang Chong's plan. But what if the Tibetans make their approach through Big Dipper City or the Annan Protectorate? The Minister of Revenue worriedly said. The Bureau of Revenue was responsible for the well-being of the people. It could not accept the tragic losses that would come from Longxi or the southwest being plunged into the flames of war. Xianxia Jianxiong spoke up. Relax. 2 steel fortresses have already been erected in Longxi and the southwest to block the Tibetans' southern paths. The King of Foreign Lands has also sent 5,000 ballista soldiers to each of those 2 areas. In addition, 600,000 prefectural army soldiers are marching toward the region and will arrive soon. Finally, Mengshi Zhao will also muster its army when the time comes to defend. They had already played out this scenario several times. In truth, the strongest defense for Longxi and the southwest was Fenjie's Mengshi Zhao army. But the fighting power of Mengshi Zhao was somewhat lacking, and it was primarily infantry. It was good for defense but lacking for offense. It was no good in an offensive battle. At some point, they had considered moving the Mengshi Zhao army to the northeast to join in dealing with the Alliance army. But the Great Tang currently had an army of more than 1 million soldiers, so the addition of Mengshi Zhao's would just be icing on the cake. In addition, as they were 2 different armies, many problems would probably appear when trying to coordinate them, and if the job were done poorly, the Mengshi Zhao army might actually drag down the Tang army. Thus, the best choice was to have them remain in the south to guard against Tibetan aggression. If the Tibetans attacked, Mengshi Zhao would not need to push them back, only by time. In addition, Xianxia Jianxiong had discussed with Wang Chong what to do if Longxi and the southwest fell. After all, given Dalen Trinling's abilities, it wouldn't be strange at all if Mengshi Zhao were defeated. But in the final analysis, they decided that with the descent of the cold wave, there was little reason for Dalen Trinling to occupy those areas, and it would not have too much effect on the war in the northeast. Moreover, the price he would pay was just too great. Once the war was over and the time came to settle accounts, the Tibetans would not be able to escape obliteration. As a wise man, Dalen Trinling would not choose to attack there. So that's how it was. The Minister of Revenue sighed in relief. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen spoke up. Time is short, so let's move on to the problem of coordination. Wars were never simply fights between 2 opposing armies. They required coordination from all parts of the empire and were massively complicated affairs. Wang Chong nodded, and everyone quickly seated themselves around the model in the center and began to confer. After a long while, the discussion ended, and everyone took their leave of Wang Chong's residence. Massaging his forehead, Wang Chong returned to the main hall after sending everyone off. There were a multitude of things in the empire that he needed to worry about, far too many. For now, I should think about how to break into the Grotto Heaven realm. Wang Chong's eyes flashed. Under his stimulation, all of the empire's advantages had been made manifest, and more soldiers were making their way to the northeast, their training going smoothly. But deep down, Wang Chong still had a deep worry. Genesis Supreme. Wang Chong couldn't help but think about this man. In the memory fragment he had obtained from Supreme Divine, he saw that Genesis Supreme had already successfully revived and seemed even stronger than before. Only a Grotto Heaven expert could contend against a Grotto Heaven expert. If he did not find a way to reach the Grotto Heaven realm soon, then if Genesis Supreme appeared on the battlefield, no one would be able to stop him. Someone of Genesis Supreme's strength was wholly capable of slaughtering all of the Great Tang's top-class generals. The consequences of that would be unthinkable. At this time, Wang Chong came to more keenly understand what the Sage Emperor meant when he said that the men in black would always be the greatest threat to the Great Tang. Genesis Supreme had yet to appear, and the forward base had not come under his attack. But this only made Wang Chong more uneasy. If Genesis Supreme had not yet appeared, it could only mean he was gathering strength so that he could come out at the last moment and decide the battle. No matter what, I have to break through that barrier and reach the Grotto Heaven realm, Wang Chong said to himself. Buzz. Wang Chong's soul entered the world of laws. The hall around him disappeared, replaced by overlapping dimensions and spider webs of law energy. If other martial artists could see what Wang Chong was seeing and experience what he was feeling, they would probably be overcome with excitement. To see the very foundation of the world was an opportunity that they could only dream about. But when he saw all this, Wang Chong slightly frowned. Li Xuantu's assistance had allowed him to reach this level, but his comprehension of Grotto Heaven laws had ended there. He had not experienced any other qualitative changes. Wang Chong's progress could already be considered extremely fast for ordinary martial artists, but it was far too slow for Wang Chong. Time would not wait for him. If he could not successfully reach the Grotto Heaven realm, then if he ran into Genesis Supreme on the battlefield, all that awaited him was death. Just how can I successfully break into the Grotto Heaven realm? Wang Chong said to himself. He could sense that he was actually not far from truly reaching the Grotto Heaven realm. He was only missing one crucial piece before he could push open the door and enter that realm. Completely fusing with Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core and fully comprehending the Grotto Heaven law he had obtained from observing the battle between Genesis Supreme and Li Xuantu. In the silence of the hall, Wang Chong continued to dwell on the world of laws and the true face of spacetime. His mind thinking back to True Lord Yellow Dragon, Firmament Supreme, Genesis Supreme, Li Xuantu, the Sage Emperor, the Grotto Heaven experts that Wang Chong had interacted with and the Grotto Heaven abilities they had displayed all flashed past Wang Chong's eyes. Their various halos of spacetime, big and small, white as jade or black as ink, or even dark gold, appeared before him. The insides of those halos of spacetime, as narrow as sheep intestines or as wide as roads, wrinkled like the insides of a stone cave or as smooth as a mirror. Wang Chong had encountered numerous Grotto Heaven realm experts, and more importantly, he had been inside their spacetime passages. He had a far greater understanding of the power of spacetime than ordinary subtle realm experts. However, there was no escaping the fact that a vast chasm existed between the subtle realm and Grotto Heaven realm. If one did not comprehend some key principle, what was nearby would actually be at the end of the world, but once one comprehended it, the end of the world would be brought right to him. But how do I do it? Wang Chong muttered. Far too much Grotto Heaven information needed to be absorbed to go from the subtle realm to the Grotto Heaven realm. Even someone as extraordinary as the Sage Emperor had still needed half a year. But Wang Chong only had 10-some days to perform the same feat. Wang Chong had pondered this for a long time, and his failure to make any progress made him more and more frustrated. Swish! Wang Chong turned into a bolt of lightning and shot out of the hall. Dark skies and cold winds flecked with snow engulfed the capital. The capital, which was positioned in the north, had also been affected by the cold airflows, and snow was drifting down much earlier than usual. But unlike with the countries in the north, it merely felt like an ordinary winter day in the capital. Buzz. Several hundred feet away from the cloud layer, Wang Chong appeared in a flash of light, floating in the air. The howling winds chilled both his body and his mind. Grotto heaven, spacetime, laws. What connects them? What is the essence of the grotto heaven realm? Wang Chong inwardly muttered to himself. His eyes swept over the sky before eventually resting on the earth. From his position, he could see the entirety of the capital. He could even make out the people walking the streets and in their homes. As Wang Chong moved his eyes to the northeast, he felt a strange sensation. He felt as if someone was looking back at him. A few moments later, a voice rang out in his ears. King of foreign lands? Eunuch Gao. Wang Chong murmured in shock. Amidst the snow to the northeast, the one looking at him was none other than Eunuch Gao, who was standing guard over the sage emperor's tomb. Are you attempting to comprehend the grotto heaven realm and are only missing that one last piece? Eunuch Gao's voice resounded in Wang Chong's mind, tinged with curiosity. Yes, Wang Chong nodded. The world fell silent, and after a long while, Eunuch Gao spoke once more. Incredible! I did not think you would reach this level in such a short amount of time. Eunuch Gao's voice was tinged with sincere praise. Each step on the path of martial arts was excruciatingly difficult. Though Wang Chong himself might not have realized it, Eunuch Gao understood that this comprehension speed was truly praiseworthy. And when one considered that Wang Chong was only 20 years of age, it was even more shocking. Since ancient times, there were probably few people besides the sage emperor who could compare to Wang Chong. Your progress is already more than 1 year faster than the sage emperor had anticipated. A thick mantle of snow surrounded the imperial mausoleum. Gao Lishur, wearing a simple robe, was seated cross-legged on the snow. His Majesty? Wang Chong's heart thumped in response to Gao Lishur's words. Ever since the sage emperor had descended and replaced third son Xian, Gao Lishur had been at his side. He would have been a direct witness to the sage emperor's breakthroughs in martial arts. He had probably been there when the sage emperor ascended from the subtle realm to the grotto heaven realm. More importantly, the sage emperor had realized that his life was running out and made plans. It was hard to say what other confidential instructions the sage emperor had left behind. If the sage emperor had predicted that he would encounter this sort of difficulty when breaking into the grotto heaven realm and had left something behind, Wang Chong's heart began to beat faster and faster. Wang Chong suppressed his excitement and sternly said, Eunuch Gao, how did the sage emperor break into the grotto heaven realm? Did he say anything about it, or leave behind anything related to it? Hey, you're talking about something related to you? In truth, the sage emperor left everything he wanted to teach you in the copper box. How could I possibly teach you anything? Eunuch Gao chuckled, understanding what Wang Chong meant. Every step of the path of martial arts is difficult. There are no shortcuts. Ah! Wang Chong was left disappointed by Eunuch Gao's words. It seemed that he had been overthinking things. Eunuch Gao began to speak again. But though the sage emperor did not leave behind some secret method to breaking into the grotto heaven realm, he truly did leave behind a few words. His Majesty said that if you really did manage to reach this level one day, beginning to break into the grotto heaven realm but still missing one crucial piece, he wanted me to tell you that he would always believe in you. Once one reaches the subtle realm, each additional step is more difficult than ascending to heaven. No one can teach you what comes after this, because each martial artist comprehends different things. Grotto heaven realm is only 3 words, but every person comprehends this realm and uses it in a different way. Telling too much would do more harm than good. After all, the same set of clothes won't fit the same on different people. His Majesty only wanted to say this. No matter what, you must always believe in yourself. You must open up your own road, and you cannot be fooled by external appearances. In addition, His Majesty said that he knew that you were a top-class martial artist from the moment he saw you, that you did not need to rely on external objects. Even without guidance, you would still be able to find your own path. Only with a clear heart can you see your nature, and only then can you see your true self, Eunuch Gao sternly said. Eunuch Gao's energy vanished, leaving Wang Chong alone with his thoughts. Eunuch Gao had truthfully provided no useful information. But perhaps I really was confused, Wang Chong said to himself. Ever since his reincarnation, Wang Chong had been constantly busy. The Southwest, the Northwest, his family, the Yuzhou rebellion, the future calamity. He had far, far too many things to worry about. This left him with little time to cultivate. The great yin-yang heaven creation art, the art of God and demon obliteration, the origin immortal art. Wang Chong had arranged it so that he cultivated only the strongest arts of the world. But as he grew stronger and stronger, he began to interact with laws and realms that didn't have much of a connection with arts and techniques. And Wang Chong had forgotten that the true apex martial arts had been created through the understandings and comprehensions of their individual creators. Whether it was the great yin-yang heaven creation art, the art of God and demon obliteration, or the origin immortal art, someone had created them from nothing. And now he had unwittingly arrived at this pass. From this perspective, the sage emperor was right. His words had implied that he needed to cut his own path and create a weapon that was truly his own. Whoosh! Wang Chong floated in the air, the winds howling around him as he thought. All of his experiences from this life and the last flitted through his mind. Wang Chong recalled those seniors from his last life and that human who had lived countless epochs ago. The apocalyptic era had been the most tragic era for humanity, but it had also been an era in which human martial arts and formations thrived. In order to deal with the otherworldly invaders, humans had thought of many solutions. The 10 great formations had been created by bringing together the knowledge and intelligence of countless humans. Perhaps it really is time for me to create a path wholly my own, Wang Chong muttered in a voice only he could hear. Slowly, Wang Chong's anxiety and pressure faded away, his mind becoming as placid as an ancient well. This was a state he had never achieved before. For a long time now, Wang Chong had been burdened by an immense pressure. In order to deal with the calamity and assist humanity in walking out of that frightening darkness from his last life, Wang Chong had taken on a pressure that left him panting for breath. Thus, there had never been a time when Wang Chong had truly relaxed. Even when cultivating, Wang Chong was extremely aggressive and objective-minded. But this time, right when the war was about to begin, the sage emperor's words had truly made Wang Chong completely empty his mind. All of his pressure and burdens were temporarily put down. Wang Chong felt his soul and body both relax, each cell seeming to stretch. In these circumstances, Wang Chong's psychic energy spread out boundlessly, his mental senses taking in everything and increasing his understanding of space-time, the laws of the world, and the various energies around him. But at this moment, Wang Chong did not care about such things. His mind had always been constantly worrying, thinking about so many things, not just martial arts, but also memories from that brief life of his before his transmigration. All of this had formed a befuddling fog before his eyes, and in truth, he had long ago lost a clear image of who he was. Only with a clear heart can you see your nature, and only then can you see your true self. The words the sage emperor had left behind rumbled in his mind. At this moment, as if a giant hammer had slammed down, the befuddling fog in his mind was blasted apart, and all those countless meandering thoughts were blown away. Buzz! Wang Chong opened his eyes in shock, and at this moment, he saw the capital once more. The upright and square walls, the numerous buildings and pavilions, the pedestrians walking the streets. All of these images shrank down until they eventually became like images on a chessboard. As he looked down on the buildings of the capital, a thought occurred to him. Time, space. Aren't all these buildings individual spaces? Perhaps I was wrong from the beginning. Space doesn't need to just be sought from within, but can also be found without. The essence of the grotto heaven realm might not be found by observing the miniature, but by observing the grandiose, Wang Chong said to himself. Boom! As he was thinking this, a boom came from the southwest. Turning to look, he saw a simple thatched hut near the city walls collapsing under the weight of snow. Isn't this the destruction of space? With this thought, Wang Chong suddenly froze. Nay! Hearing another disturbance, Wang Chong turned to look. It seemed that several martial artists had begun to fight on the street. The city guard had taken notice and had swiftly organized into several groups that had begun to close around the fighting martial artists. From Wang Chong's perspective, he could see that one group of city guard had formed a circle, as had the city guard on the other side. This was a classical tactic with which one could defend against attacks from other angles while advancing. The two groups of city guard drew closer and closer until, ultimately, they combined. From Wang Chong's perspective, it was two circles getting closer and closer until they fused. Wasn't this the fusion of different spaces? Wang Chong pondered the matter even more deeply. Clink-clang, clink-clang. The hammering of metal rang out through the snowstorm. Turning to the sound, he saw thick plumes of smoke rising from the Zhang clan estate as its smiths hammered metal. In the center of their estate, a metal contraption that was as large as a house rapidly took shape through the effort of 10 some Zhang clan members. This was a war machine being created for the frontline base in the northeast. Isn't this just the construction of a space? Wang Chong inwardly muttered to himself. His mind was moving rapidly now. At this time, his understanding of Grotto Heaven Realm laws had completely shifted. He had always believed that only by immersing himself in the laws of the world could he understand their fundamentals, but as he looked around, he realized that all things in the world were infused with its principles. Crack! Something seemed to break. Deep in Wang Chong's mind, that immense and sturdy barrier suddenly fractured, a massive fissure spreading through it. Buzz! And as Wang Chong came to comprehend these principles, the world before him changed. Time slowed down to a crawl. The snowflakes drifting down seemed to become much lighter, drifting down at a much slower speed. The scattered and miscellaneous knowledge and energy of the Grotto Heaven realm in Wang Chong's mind were drawn by some invisible force, fusing with the chessboard-like projection of the capital in Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong felt as if he had entered a mysterious world. Boom! After what seemed like an interminable second, the people of the capital heard a rumble of thunder. Now that he had broken through that barrier, Wang Chong had finally shattered his shackles and reached an even higher realm. Even though he had broken through that barrier, Wang Chong's growth was still too slow. Still not enough. I have to go further. As this thought passed through his mind, boom! Divine embryos 1 and 2 jumped out and appeared at his side. Thump thump. The two divine embryos placed their hands on Wang Chong's shoulders, and the energy that had been seized from Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core surged into his body. With the aid from the two divine embryos, Wang Chong felt his strength rise, and his understanding of the Grotto Heaven realm instantly made a giant leap. Boom! But he wasn't even done yet. With another rumble, the magnificent pavilion of the Transmigration heaven appeared behind him, all of its floors shining with an awesome light. A moment later, the Transmigration heaven collapsed. However, under the guidance of some invisible energy, the Transmigration heaven melded with the Grotto Heaven laws and worldly laws that Wang Chong had comprehended and began to reconstruct itself. This was no longer the ordinary Transmigration heaven, nor was it the ordinary origin immortal art. This was a new Transmigration heaven that had been rebuilt using the laws of the world, and its power was far greater than before. Buzz! With a moment's thought, the dazzling pavilion began to rebuild itself, using these laws as its frame. It started off with one floor, and with a great rumble a second floor emerged, then a third, a fourth, a seventh, eighth, ninth, 11th, 12th. The Transmigration heaven reconstructed itself far faster than it had first taken to build. And at only the 13th floor, Wang Chong was already just as strong as he had been at level 20-some of the previous Transmigration heaven, and he was still growing stronger. Moreover, this new Transmigration heaven pulsed with ripples of spacetime power that had never been there before. This was an ability that was entirely Wang Chong's own. Not even the creator of the origin immortal art had imagined that the Transmigration heaven could be fused with the understanding of the Grotto Heaven core. Whoosh! For ordinary people, the developments high in the sky were so far beyond their senses that they might as well have been taking place in another world. Yet this was not the case for several martial artists. At the Su residence, Xianxia sat in a bamboo chair, his eyes closed. Suddenly, his eyes flew open in alarm as he sensed the shift in the skies. This is the Grotto Heaven. How? Xianxia had clashed with true Lord Yellow Dragon, and he had never expected to sense a similar energy now on Wang Chong. One step to heaven. Truly one step to heaven. If one accounted for all the hidden experts in the world, there were actually quite a few experts who could reach the subtle realm. But even amongst the men in black, those who could reach the Grotto Heaven realm were exceptionally rare. And now, Wang Chong had managed to reach the Grotto Heaven realm, truly managing to reach heaven in a single step. Starting from now, the number of people who could suppress Wang Chong could be counted with one's fingers. More importantly, Wang Chong was still growing stronger and stronger. It was impossible to say what level he would stop at. Su Zhengqin was far from the only one who had sensed this development in the skies. Truly a heaven-blessed talent. Your Majesty, you chose correctly. In front of the imperial mausoleum, Eunuch Gao sat before his thatched hut, emotionally sighing as he sensed that change in the skies. After ending his conversation with Wang Chong, he had merely concealed his energy, not left. Not even Gao Lishur had imagined that simply relaying the Sage Emperor's comment would allow Wang Chong to break through the threshold and reach the Grotto Heaven realm. No one had ever used this method to break through before. With this step in cultivation, no one in the Great Tang Empire besides the Sage Emperor and Li Xuantu could match Wang Chong. At this moment, Wang Chong had squeezed his way into the top class of experts. Gao Lishur had not expected this sort of progress, and he felt relieved. As time slowly passed, Wang Chong's aura grew stronger and stronger, and even the people in the capital began to feel a vague pressure. But a moment later, it vanished, as did Wang Chong in the sky. The cold wave continued to advance, the weather growing colder and colder with each day. In the east, all the countries besides the Eastern Turkic Khaganate, which had just experienced a war, were peaceful on the surface, but the stench of war was growing thicker and thicker by the day. In secret, the countries had already begun to muster their soldiers and gather supplies. This was true from the lofty Yusang Empire to Goguryeo by the Eastern Sea. Even though the weather was getting colder and colder, thick plumes of smoke rose from the north. All the countries were forging weapons and expanding their armies. This was an unprecedented sight. None of the countries made a noise, but all of them were silently expanding their armies. And as preparations for war took place on the ground, the heavens also began to shift. Amongst the constellations, the regions representing various countries all seethed with killing intent. Some days later, when that bleak and somber air had reached its maximum, an evolution finally took place. Rumble. At noon, without any warning, the capital began to shudder. Crack. A tall wall to the southwest suddenly collapsed, showering the ground with debris. At the Imperial Observatory, the sundial-shaped observation platform fell into two pieces with a resounding crack. The astrologers who had been studying the heavens cried out in alarm as they fell to the ground. What's going on? The star observation platform is placed at the concentration of Dragon Qi and was built by Heavenly Master Yuan several hundred years ago. How could it suddenly fall apart? The astrologers cared little about the dust covering their bodies, staring in shock at the sundered observation platform. Heavenly Master Yuan Tiangang from Taizong's era was an existence idolized by all the official astrologers and sorcerers in the realm, with the stature of a mythical figure. The observation platform erected by this man was exceptionally sturdy, and careful and exhaustive calculations had gone into its construction. Even when the rest of the world was crumbling, it had never shown any sign of damage. But now, the observation platform had fallen apart in a single day, leaving everyone reeling in disbelief. Several hundred years, Heavenly Master Yuan said, "So long as the sundial exists, the Great Tang will thrive. When the sundial collapses, disaster will come. This is an extremely ill omen," an astrologer said, his face going pale. As everyone else reeled in shock, an astrologer pointed at the sky and yelled, "Forget the observation platform. Look at the heavens." Everyone instantly turned their attention to the heavens. Ordinary people could only see the stars, but astrologers saw something completely different. All of the stars had dimmed, and in the southwest, northeast, and southeast, black energy seethed, obscuring the heavens. And if one looked around, it seemed as if countless stars were raining down. A shift in the stars, and the central planes is shifting. This is an ill omen that the fortune of the Central Plains is running dry. The leading imperial astrologer let out a grief-stricken cry. Rumble. As if in response to his words, in the great wilderness to the southwest, a majestic mountain range trembled. Countless stones spilled down from the slopes while mighty trees snapped at their trunks. As if this massive mountain range had been struck by a massive impact, it suddenly broke into two halves. Rhea. Deep within this mountain range, in a plain that normal eyes could not see, a massive dragon raised its body and painfully howled. Deep in the mountains across the land, various astrologers turned ghastly pale. In the southeast, northwest, and in Longxi, similar incidents took place. In some places, mountains broke apart, and in other places, rivers changed course, and still in other places, fissures opened up. Countless buildings trembled and collapsed. Within Taiji Palace, a door creaked open. Li Hong, still holding a memorial he had been reviewing, solemnly walked out. Li Jingzhong quickly followed. Shifts in the heavens affected all of the Central Plains, and the Imperial Palace, as the nexus of Dragon Qi, received far more of a shock than other places. As Li Hong stepped out, the earth beneath him shuddered. Cries of alarm came from the depths of the palace, from many of the palace maids and consorts who were frightened by this disturbance. Li Hong could even hear the shattering of porcelain tiles. The imperial palace had fallen into chaos. Your Majesty, the palace is in turmoil. Why don't we? Li Jingzhong looked hesitantly at Li Hong. There's no need. Li Hong confidently waved his hand in refusal. We are the sovereign of the country. We will never leave so easily. Li Hong slowly raised his eyes to the sky. As the son of heaven of the Great Tang and the master of its Dragon Qi, Li Hong was extremely sensitive to shifts in Dragon Qi. When the heavens had shifted, Li Hong had felt his Dragon Qi pulse. Imperial Father, is this the moment you spoke of? We are not the sovereign of a vanquished country, and the Great Tang is not showing signs of being conquered. No matter what danger is coming, we will stop it and protect the country for the sake of its people. Li Heng's robes danced around him, his eyes exploding with dazzling light. To the southwest of the imperial palace, in the King of Foreign Lands' residence, Wang Chong's original body was also observing the shift in the heavens. Has the foundation of the world been shaken? Wang Chong asked himself as he looked up at the dark skies. For Wang Chong, this was not some heavenly phenomenon. To the astrologers, there were many potential reasons for this massive shift in the Central Plains, including the drying up of Dragon Qi, but Wang Chong knew that all this had a very simple explanation. The incessant surging of the cold wave in the north was due to the constant accumulation of energy from another world in this one. Once this energy hit a certain threshold, it would experience a qualitative transformation and begin to shake and eat away at the foundation of this world, resulting in all these shifts. And all this was closely connected to heaven and the men in black. You won't have it easy for much longer. One day, I'll expose your true face and utterly destroy you. But before that, Wang Chong slowly looked toward Yuzhou. Let's kill your so-called child of the world and end this war. And Yaluishan, are you ready? Rumble. A lightning bolt blazed down from the heavens, streaking from the capital toward the distant northeast. At this time, an entirely different scene was playing out in Yuzhou. Dark clouds obscured the sky, stretching all the way from the border with the Eastern Turks to the very tip of Goguryeo, a roiling sea of darkness. These seething dark clouds gathered around Yuzhou, bringing Dragon Qi with them. And if one looked carefully, one could see that the dark clouds had vaguely taken the form of a massive black dragon, coiling in the air with its claws bared in the direction of the capital as if it was cheering on Yaluishan. Kakrak. Lighting crackled within the clouds, making the black dragon seem even more savage and terrifying. All the soldiers of Yuzhou looked up at the sky in shock and awe. All of them could see that the black clouds were most concentrated, the lightning the most dazzling, right above the Anong Protectorate headquarters, and that was also where the dragon's head was. There were even slender tendrils of lightning coming down from the black dragon and landing on the Anong Protectorate headquarters, as if the two shared some mysterious connection. As more and more dark clouds gathered, the black dragon grew larger and larger, exerting more and more pressure on those below. It's about time. In front of the Anong Protectorate headquarters, Gao Shang slowly raised his eyes to the sky, a bright glint within them. The world had shifted, and the black dragon had manifested. Although Gao Shang had seen those records in his ancient texts, this was his first time seeing it with his own eyes. This was not simply a congregation of black clouds. This black dragon contained the dragon chi that they had stolen from the capital, and also the dragon chi that came from Yuzhou being the future den of the dragon. Their fusion had brought forth this black dragon. Even though it was pitch black, Gao Shang did not care. There was no strict difference between a black dragon and a true dragon. This was because when the true dragon dominated the realm, only the black dragon had a chance of overturning the dynasty, clearing out the old and bringing in the new. And once the black dragon devoured the true dragon, it would transform into the true dragon. The difference between success and failure had never been a matter of destiny. Gao Shang waved his sleeve and firmly ordered, "Pass on my order. Prepare to activate the formation." The manifestation of the black dragon was an extremely rare opportunity. If they missed out on this day, they could put aside any thought of strengthening Yuzhou. Yes, below Gao Shang, a Yuzhou horseman swiftly mounted his horse and rode into the distance. A few moments later, the lands of Yuzhou began to tremble. On the borders of Yuzhou, to the south, east, west, and north, black streams of energy shot into the air and connected to the savage black dragon. Each pillar of black energy was created through the work of 7 or 8 black-robed sorcerers who were performing a ritualistic dance. In their center was either a large-handled cauldron, or a copper cauldron, or the sculpture of a monster, or a copper goblet. Though these items were in different shapes and sizes, they all shared one thing in common. They were all pitch black. Gao Shang had gathered these black-robed sorcerers and collected these strange, black ritual tools to create this formation. As the formation was set into motion, the black ritual tools resonated with the black dragon in the sky and finally produced a subtle change. Bang! After a moment that seemed to drag on for an eternity, the black dragon finished absorbing the fortune of the world, and the event that Gao Shang had long anticipated finally took place. Boom! The giant black dragon opened its maw and spewed out a black torrent of energy riddled with lightning. With thunderous speed, the black torrent crashed into the Anong Protectorate headquarters. The world fell silent. A moment later, as if the earth had sundered apart, a massive shockwave of energy swept out from the Anong Protectorate headquarters. The formless black energy suddenly became like dense ocean waves. Ah! The black energy passed through a Yuzhou soldier standing guard on the wall. His body went stiff, and his helmet exploded, his hair scattering apart as he raised his head and howled like a wolf. Crack clack. A moment later, the Yuzhou soldier's body cracked and groaned. He had originally been at the first tier of the true martial realm, but a moment later he broke into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. In the end, he went all the way tier 7 of the true martial realm. Such progress was truly flabbergasting. And the same transformation happened to all the other Yuzhou soldiers. All the way from the lowly soldiers to the generals, all the soldiers of Yuzhou were strengthened by the black dragon, growing stronger at an astonishing pace. Atop the roof of the Anong Protectorate headquarters, Cui Qianyu and Tian Qingxi were flabbergasted by the sight. Although Gao Shang had said that this was what would happen, none of them had imagined that the black dragon formation would have such a huge effect. Yuzhou had an army of 600,000 soldiers. At the minimum, the soldiers received a boost of 2 to 3 tiers, with some even growing stronger by 6 or 7 tiers. Even Cui Qianyu and Tian Qingxi, who already had extremely high levels of cultivation and had not expected much of a boost from the black dragon, felt themselves getting significantly stronger. And this was only the beginning. Crack! As if the heavens themselves had split open, a massive vortex appeared next to the black dragon. A moment later, another black pillar of energy crashed down, further strengthening the Yuzhou army. On the roof, and Yaluishan was taken aback by this sight. But as he came to understand what it was, he heartily laughed. The power of the world. At this crucial moment, the familiar power of the world had once more appeared to strengthen his army. At this moment, even the world was helping him. Wang Chong, do you see it? Do you see it? The entire world stands on my side. So why are you still trying to fight me? And Yaluoshan spread out his arms and laughed, his eyes bright. Your Excellency. Get ready. Gao Shang's voice rang out, surprised, and Yaluoshan followed Gao Shang's gaze and looked up. High in the sky, the black dragon's crimson eyes had erupted with a light countless times brighter than the sun, and that enormous dragon head was looking straight at him. Before Yaluoshan could react, the black dragon's eyes unleashed two beams of light that fused together into a thick, red lightning bolt that flashed through space and slammed into Yaluoshan. At the same time, another black pillar of energy descended on Yaluoshan. Ah! Yaluoshan's clothes blew apart as he let out a cry that could alarm the heavens. But unlike the others, Yaluoshan's cry contained no pain, only boundless ecstasy. The baptism of the black dragon's crimson eyes and the pillar of black energy caused Yaluoshan to rapidly grow stronger. In just a few moments, a spatial passage opened up above Yaluoshan's head, golden subtle realm energy surging down like a waterfall. The subtle realm. It took only a few seconds for Yaluoshan to break into the subtle realm. Unlike the subtle realm strength that he had only managed to reach through the world armor, Yaluoshan had truly grown strong enough to break through the threshold. This was a qualitative evolution. Ha ha ha! Wonderful! Yaluoshan heartily laughed as he felt the boundless energy inside him. He had never felt such powerful energy before. More importantly, he was continuing to get stronger and stronger. A moment later, another dragon breath spewed out, and Yaluoshan's body crackled with lightning. The energy descending from the heavens condensed into a slender black dragon that coiled around Yaluoshan, bolstering his domineering aura and endowing him with the faint aura of a sovereign. Those around him had yet to sense it, but on the ground, Gao Shang, who had been observing Yaluoshan this entire time, gave a slight nod of approval. Success. Starting from now, the fates of these two are finally one. The Black Dragon is His Excellency, and His Excellency is the Black Dragon. Gao Shang thought to himself. Although Yaluoshan had possessed the destiny of the Black Dragon before, the connection between the two of them had not been sturdy. If something had happened to Yuzhou or some second rebellious faction had appeared, the Black Dragon might have moved to another person. But when that crimson energy descended on Yaluoshan, everything became set in stone. The Black Dragon could only be Yaluoshan. And Yaluoshan was now fated to be the true dragon son of heaven, the master of the central plains. Bang! After some time, Yaluoshan suddenly punched, sending out a black torrent of energy suffused with golden light. It traveled several thousand feet, distorting space wherever it went, even creating a long, black spatial fissure. This majestic energy was far beyond the great general level and could leave any expert frightened. Yaluoshan, wearing the world armor, radiated a vast sea of astonishing energy. Wang Chong, I'll definitely repay my humiliations to you by 100 times. This time you won't have a single chance. I'll tear apart your fortress, your great Tang, and Li Heng into pieces. Yaluoshan brazenly laughed, his body exuding excitement. Gao Shang immediately went up to Yaluoshan's side, raised his robe and got down on his knees. Master, now is the moment. Cui Qianyu, Tian Qianjin, and Tian Qingxi immediately understood what was going on, excitedly coming forward and prostrating. Master, today is the day for your grand aspiration to be fulfilled. Master, let's begin the war. Rumble. As if they had heard these calls, all the 600,000 some soldiers of Zhou got down on their knees and called out in unison. Master! 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 A great roar swept through the world. Yaluoshan was their master, and just as the sky could not have two suns, a man could not have two masters. From the moment these people had decided to call Yaluoshan their master, his intentions had been exposed. Now they no longer needed to hide their ambitions. The world fell silent. Standing atop the Anong Protectorate headquarters, Yaluoshan looked down at all the tens of thousands of kneeling soldiers, as well as the Yeluo standing atop the distant mountains, and he felt his soldiers and his subordinates blazing with energy. Whoosh! And Yaluishan let out a long sigh, but deep down, his ambition swept through him like a wildfire, no longer able to be suppressed. Clang! Above the Anong Protectorate headquarters, there was a cold flash of light. A moment later, and Yaluishan pulled out his sword and pointed it upward. All soldiers, hear my order. The fortune of the Great Tang is spent, and today we execute Wang Chong and cut down the tyrant. We fight! And Yaluishan roared. Like oil had been spilled on a flame, the 600,000 Yuzhou cavalry immediately erupted in a frenzy. Fight! 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 Excited bellows resounded through the world. With pride swelling in his heart, and Yaluishan heartily laughed. All his subordinates were gathered, and an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers waited at his command. With such a majestic momentum, was there anything he could not do? Move out! With this order, all of Yuzhou began to shake and sway, hundreds of thousands of cavalry rumbling toward the alliance's gathering point. Meanwhile, in the Goguryeo Empire, Yun Geisaman, 6 black sabers on his back, stood atop the walls of Wando. Although Goguryeo was a small country compared to the Great Tang, and Yun Geisaman was no true dragon, son of heaven, Yun Geisaman was still a sovereign and possessed a faint sliver of dragon chi. When the world fell into turmoil and the heavens shifted, Yun Geisaman had sensed the weakening of the Central Plains dragon chi and the surge of dragon chi in Yuzhou. This waning and waxing was a sign to Yun Geisaman. This day has finally come. Yun Geisaman's body erupted with energy as he snapped his fingers, instantly obliterating in Yaluishan's letter, sending countless bits of paper drifting down from the walls like snow. Below the walls, a sea of Gogrian soldiers stood like statues, their cold armor radiating killing intent amidst the biting winds. All of them were awaiting Yun Geisaman's order. Clang! With a clang, Goguryeo Emperor Yun Geisaman pulled out his sword and pointed it at the Central Plains, releasing the voice he had suppressed for several decades. Pass on my order. I, Yun Geisaman, Emperor of Goguryeo, formally declare war against the Great Tang. Fight! 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 Beneath the walls of Wando, 1 million Gogrian soldiers raised their weapons and roared. Bong bong bong. War drums boomed and armor clattered as the Goguryeo's million-man army began to move out. In a tent in the Eastern Turkic Khaganate, a muscular figure got down on one knee and loudly said, Khagan, Goguryeo has sent the signal. Ha ha ha. Is that so? Yun Geisaman, you're truly an impatient one. Osmish Khagan, wearing a cape of white fox fur, brazenly laughed as he slowly stood up from his throne. As he did, his body erupted with energy. Osmish Khagan's eyes quickly turned to a Turkic man in front of him. Tai Chi Bil Eli, I must trouble you this time. This general will go. Tai Chi Bil Eli bowed, and his right fist thumped against his left breast. His eyes turned steely as he stood up. Lifting the tent flap, Tai Chi Bil Eli walked out of the tent. Great General! Outside, 2 of the Khagan's personal guards bowed to Tai Chi Bil Eli, but Tai Chi Bil Eli cared little about them. Tai Chi Bil Eli surveyed the world outside the tent. From the summit, he could see that the world of the Eastern Turkic Khaganate had been turned into a world of ice and snow. And amidst the whiteness were countless Eastern Turkic cavalry, a vast army that extended to the horizon. At this moment, all the cavalry looked up toward him. Nearby, the other great generals looked toward him, waiting for his order. Tai Chi Bilili's eyes flashed as he spoke 2 words. Move out! Boom! A moment later, the silent world suddenly came to life. Banners unfurled and warhorses neighed as the vast army of Eastern Turkic cavalry surged toward Yuzhou. At the same time, the Shi and Khitans also began to move out. The Shi and Khitans were simply 2 great tribes, so they could not compare to the Eastern Turkic Khaganate and Goguryeo. But the fact that they were able to survive amidst the clashing countries of the northeast was proof enough of their strength. Although they were not great in number, their ferocity could match or exceed that of the other countries. Kill! In a snow-covered hall sat King Kuge, his face covered with a thick beard, part of which had been gathered into 2 braids that drooped down from the corners of his lips. With a swing of his hand, he flourished his chitin saber and roared. At his side, a foreign woman of great charm suddenly rode forward upon a horse, capturing everyone's attention.